Hey guys, it's me again. Day 3, the final day of the SFA Digital Summit, and I'm here in beautiful Poblacion, Makati. If you look around me, I have BGC in the background. If we did a 360, you would see the Makati skyline. You'd also see Mandaluyong to the right of me over here. This is one of my favorite spots. This is Dr. Wine. It's a French restaurant at the bottom that has a wide selection of wines from around the world. And on top, there used to be a restaurant slash bar called Cartel, and they actually got shut down because they were not complying to COVID rules during the height of the pandemic here in the Philippines. But that being said, day one was how to build an e-commerce brand. So we talked about the steps that it takes, what a brand means, how to communicate that with your audience. So we had Jordan Glickman, we had Harrison Bevins talk about building an Amazon business that you can sell. We had Alan Scanlan talk about his e-commerce brand that he built up in the last year or so. We had marketing for FBA by Emma Schumer-Tamir. We had topics on crowdfunding as well by Nalan. So lots of great information there. So that was day one. Day two was the nitty-gritty of manufacturing. That was me. That was my business partner Mike. That was Andy Church talking about quality control. That was Luke Francis talking about the manufacturing pitfalls. So super important, all the right steps you have to take. That was also Renault talking about design for manufacturing. So super important, all the steps you have to take when it comes to designing your product to make it something that could actually be produced. And then the quality control steps, the mass production steps, supplier vetting, and also understanding the mistakes that other people have made in the past so you don't have to make those same mistakes. Day three is the logical thing would be logistics, right? Shipping and logistics is what we're going to be covering. We're also going to be covering product compliance. You know, when you're shipping to different countries have different standards. And if you don't have certain standards met, if your goods arrive at the port, they could get seized. We also talk about leveraging community to build a true e-commerce brand. We're going to be talking about going beyond Amazon. Obviously, Amazon is a great resource to start your business and start selling on, but you also want to build a brand beyond Amazon. You don't want to be 100% reliant on Amazon. And speaking of Amazon, we also have one of my good friends, Lorenzo Payman, who covers how to make your FBA business more defensible by adding a cause to it. And finally, and last but not least, Facebook ads for your e-commerce business by Jordan Glickman once again. So I hope you enjoyed day three. This is the final day. If you haven't gone through everything, you need to make sure you watch the day two videos before you get here because you want to follow the right steps. I know everybody will be in a different place, but again, by the end of this day, if you follow day one, day two, day three, you should have a blueprint on how to build a 6 to 7 figure e-commerce business.
So we mentioned freight forwarders a few times. Very important terminology to know and know who they are particularly. It's essentially a company that's between you and the large shipping carriers. So it's kind of like you can look at it as a travel agent of sorts that can help you book with those larger vessels, or they can book with the express air carriers, whether it's DHL or any of those other carriers, SF Express. And they do take a lot of the headache out. So there is a lot of value in working with freight forwarders, particularly whenever you're just starting out, but also whether you're doing LCL or FCL. We'll touch into what those mean also. But the way that they operate is fairly simple. You give them all of the information, so where they're going to be picking it up from, what the pricing is, what the product is, where they're going to be delivering it to. And you might have to provide them with your EIN or your tax ID sometimes to help with customs clearance. And they should help you coordinate all the paperwork, all the documentation, all the import documentation as well to that final destination. So that's what their value is. They can help you with classifying the correct HTS code, which we'll also talk about in a second. They can help with making sure that your products are compliant with Amazon FBA, which is such an important topic to actually cover also. And because FBA has so many strict rules. But aside from that, they can also help you get better rates. But there are some downsides, or I guess not downsides to using a freight forwarder, just sort of some things to expect. So for example, understanding that those prices that when you get a price from them initially, it's just a quote. It's not necessarily the final price. You might see, let's say $6,000 for a 40-foot container from Shanghai to Georgia or North Carolina, And 3 weeks later, when it actually arrives to the port, now you have to pay $6,300, $6,400. It's not necessarily because they want to scam you. A lot of times businesses might tend to think that, but it's because there could be some general rate increases, or there could be equipment shortages, which we're seeing today. And so in those cases, they need to pay more to those shipping carriers to guarantee that you can get that container, to guarantee that it can be gated in on time and it's not going to be rolled. So there's tons of benefits to working with freight forwarders. Highly suggest just doing your research as to who you're going to be working with, because the cheaper that you go with a freight forwarder tends to be the worst service that you're going to get down the road also. So next important topic is covering just the general process of international freight. And this is whether, again, you're a new seller, you've never sold before, or you're an established business and you're just looking to expand. You really need to know your options. So general process is always important to understand to be able to get those COGS, or those costs of goods sold, right? Because there's just a lot that goes on behind it. So the first thing would be to always make sure that you're getting the most optimal master cartons, weights, dimensions, packaging. I've seen some master cartons that have, a quarter of it just empty because they didn't want to use smaller boxes or pack it tighter. And you can spend so much money in just that small unused space. So I would work with your supplier to try to optimize those. But once you get those, of course, you need to calculate the volumes, the weights, whether they need to be palletized, whether they need to be labeled and prepped for FBA, whatever the case may be there. And you're going to be working with your freight forwarders to really determine what requirements you have. So if it's a wooden product, for example, you might encounter some fumigation charges, right? And that could range anywhere from $50 to $150, $200, just really depends on who you're working with and how quickly you need it. Sometimes they are backed up, and if you can pay them a little bit more, they will prioritize your order also. So from there, you'll need to decide on a shipping method, and that's something else that we'll touch on, but you'll decide on whether that's going to be via sea freight, whether that's express air, whether it's multimodal. Again, something we'll definitely cover. And determining hazardous goods, that's just as important, mainly because they do need to use different containers for those. So when we saw COVID-19 hit, we saw that PPE was on a huge surge.